Okay, to grow a vase, you're going to, I usually start out with 1 or 2 pounds. That's going to make a vase that's maybe this high, depending on width. And you're going to center it on the wheel as you would any other form. But with vase forms, especially if you want them symmetrical and you have a very, very narrow neck, this part is really, really important. Making sure all your clay particles are in alignment. All right. So a couple things to think about is I always like to start my vase forms with a pretty simple cylinder. And especially if you want to create a really narrow neck, every time you collar after a pull, and you can kind of see that centrifugal force pulling the lip outwards, you're gonna collar it down, but you're also gonna collar it inwards so that clay on the top doesn't get super weak. And I'm actually releasing a little bit of pressure when I'm pulling these walls. So the top part right here, like to here, is a little bit thicker because I'm gonna need that thickness when I'm making that really skinny neck. So remembering to kind of collar my neck in a little, or your lip. Okay, so when you get, this clay right here is gonna be the body of my pot. And so I always like to get the body of the pot down first. It's kind of just like in drawing class when you're working general to specific. You always want to get the body down first, because when you collar that neck in, you're not going to be able to stick your hand down there anymore, right? So one thing to think about is you want to pull all the water out of that pot before you close and start working on your neck. So it's nice to have good old sponge on a stick, right? And you also want to make sure that you're compressing that floor really well. And that you've got enough thickness in that foot, or the floor, to trim in a foot. Okay, so now I'm going to start collaring this neck in a little more, but not all the way. And I'm gonna start pulling, or pushing, I guess, this form very slowly outwards into a bulbish shape using my sponge on a stick. Or you can use a potter's thumb. That's a great tool too. And I'm not worrying too much about what's going on down here because I can trim that out later. But I do want to be really sensitive to if I see any sagging happening. Probably gonna stop what I'm doing. And hit it with the heat gun, which is probably a good thing to do now. Give it a little strength. You'll also notice how every time I'm making an adjustment on the pot, I'm working really, really, really slowly. Because if you're making erratic motions, you're gonna whack the pot out of symmetry. Okay, let's see. And now you can kind of come in and take off a little bit of this chunk. But again, I'm not worrying too much about what's going on down there because I can trim that when the pot is sturdier, leather hard. Okay, so really what I'm focusing on right now is getting the walls of the body of the pot pretty even all the way through. And it's okay if it's a little thicker down here, and that's actually gonna give the pot some strength in this wet stage. But I do wanna make sure that they're pretty even all the way around. Somewhat even. Okay, so that's looking pretty bulbous, which is good. Just gonna push this space out just a little bit. Okay, so I notice it's kind of starting to sink a little from that water addition. So if that happens, don't panic. Just hit it with the heat gun, pull some of that water off. that's much more bulbous. That's what I was going for. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. All right, so now we're going to start pulling up this neck. And I want to make sure that the neck is flat at the top. So I'm just going to take some of that off with the needle tool. I'm going to use my hands like this to collar this neck inwards. Ooh, it's sinking. Okay, so pulling this neck, you just gotta be really, really patient with it. Make sure your hands are really wet too, or else you're going to catch and throw it off balance. And make sure you're collaring after each one so you have a nice flat top. And as this neck gets skinnier and skinnier, you kind of have to touch it lighter and lighter and lighter each time. And make sure that it's wet, but not sopping wet. So it's strong enough to really handle what you're doing, but soft or not catching any surface tension. Okay, when you get close to kind of what you want, I would hit it with the heat gun and get it to the point where it's not tacky anymore. Make sure your hands are super, super clean when you're about to cut off. So got a bit of a wobble here. I want to cut that off.
Could you trim it potentially as well?
What do you mean?
Like after you
Trim the body?
Trim the lip.
Yes, I'm about to do that.
But could you do it like after the bisque? Or like when you're trimming things?
It depends on how much of a wobble you have, because you might end up just snapping it off.
Right.
You know? I just can't find my needle tool. But you could try. You could try sanding it down.
Yeah, sure.
There we go. Okay, so you also have to be really careful when you're doing this, because you can kind of rip the neck off too on accident, which is not ideal. Last time I was doing this, I totally did that. I was like, no, to get this far and then rip it off. It's sad. Okay. Okay, so it's not exactly the form I want, but I'm going to show you this little sneaky trick that will help balloon out the body a little bit. But you want to make sure that your lip is really dry to do this. And your neck is pretty firm. So you can actually just blow air into it and it'll blow the body out. You want to make sure that you don't blow too hard or it'll blow a hole in it. That was good. That got rid of that little crease I didn't really like there. I'm just going to come in and compress. And that gives your pot a little bit of breath. Like it looks like it's actually kind of inhaling and or exhaling, holding in a breath, right? Once this pot is kind of more stable, it is a good idea to take down as much off the foot as you can. But I caution you to wait until the pot is kind of in the earlier stages of leather hard, right? Or else you're going to jeopardize the integrity of the walls a little bit. And I want a really nice little foot, like a very tiny. I want it to tuck in really quickly. So I'm going to try to trim back as much of that as I can without pulling it off the wheel on accident. Hopefully we don't do that. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Just gonna clean up my wheel head here. And when I go to take this thing off, I wanna make sure that it's not tacky anymore, so I'm not leaving fingerprints, and also the walls are sturdy enough to handle. And I'm only gonna be holding it from the bottom and pulling it up. Can demo that now. Just give it a little heat before I take it off. And so to trim this thing, you would use a chuck that looks like this. Trimming chuck, right? Looks like this. You center this on the wheel, lock it down with clay, and then you can tip your pot upside down and that neck goes down in the hole so it doesn't get all messed up, and you can trim that foot really nicely.